Hello and welcome to another Spotlight on Technology. Today, it's not necessarily one technology we're talking about. It's a whole plethora of different technologies in the kind of operational side of security where monitoring, dealing with incidents through, logs that are coming out, that kind of thing, bit of XDR, all kinds of different technologies that kind of wrap into one good bundle. And I am very fortunate to have one of the kind of leading companies in this space who have very nicely lent me Jason to come and talk to us about that. And maybe we can have some really good discourse. So, Jason, do you want to kind of introduce yourself to the guys out there, the guys and girls out there, and just tell them a little bit about your background, who you work for, and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And thanks for having us on today. Really appreciate it. So, Jason Monger, I work for a company called Arctic Wolf. I'm a pre-sales systems engineer for Arctic Wolf. I've been here for just coming up for 2 years now, which is just really about the time that they expanded. They're a US company that deliver security operations as a service. They expanded from the US into the international market, into EMEA initially, about 2 years ago. The company itself has been going for about 10 years. So about 2 years ago, they expanded into EMEA, into the UK market, into the Nordics, into Benelux, and into DAC region. And I was fortunate enough to be one of the early people that joined during that expansion. So that's me. I guess background-wise, I've been in IT probably like yourself, Jim, for maybe too long, counting in decades, if you like.
Yes.
All sorts of different types of IT, both working for vendors in a pre-sales role, but also in an implementation role further back, but also working for end user companies as well. So working with large corporate companies as an architect for many years. So that's me.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's great to talk to somebody with a similar kind of background to myself. I mean, I tended to stay away directly with the vendors and kind of always ended up being a consultant dealing with a variety of different vendors with a variety of different tools. And I have to say, I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years or even over 25 years now. And it's a different space now than it was back then. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but you go back, say, 20 years, and we didn't have anywhere near the tools that we do now available to us to even maintain what we would consider nowadays as a very barest minimum level of security.
Yeah, a massive change in the tool set. If you look at the evolution of cybersecurity, it's evolved radically. It's had to evolve radically over the last, well, continually, and it will continue to evolve, right? But not only that, businesses have evolved. If you look back to even 10 years ago or further back, it was kind of brick and mortar kind of businesses, right? People are on the journey to cloud, but it was pretty early, I guess, in the last, started over the last sort of 20 years. People are adopting SaaS applications. The perimeter has changed for businesses. The pandemic has changed how people work, right? They're working from home. That's the new normal. Nobody's going back to the office full time. That's not what I'm seeing with customers. And so cybersecurity tooling has had to evolve with it, right? Over those changes to how the business operates, how IT operates to enable the business. Cybersecurity has to evolve to meet those new changes as well. And I guess as well as that, there's changes to the threat actors. Right? They're a lot more sophisticated, a lot more prevalent now. There's a lot more out there. There's a lot of different well-known groups that are attacking organizations. We see it in the news every day. And so the cybersecurity defense needs to be much more mature, much more operational than what it was traditionally, right? It used to be, I have some AV on my endpoints and my servers. I have some firewalls in place, and if I'm secure at the perimeter and I've got that in place, that's kind of enough. But, that's going back quite a way. And it's evolved an awful lot since then, as we know. We need to look at a much wider attack surface now because of that evolution that I talked about.
Absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I was there when, endpoint security was the big ticket item. It cost a lot to have it. It's like 25 quid per license. Sort of 25, 30 quid per node, as they used to term it back then. And now, God, I mean, that's when our server set were always on premise. Now we didn't have cloud back then. We didn't have any of that. It's like you could walk into a room and see your server, and normally it was something much, half the size of a rack, and that was your email. Now very different landscape. And you're right. Our tool sets have had to change and mature as they've gone. There's a lot more spending going on in this space now, a lot more innovation in our tool sets, because, as I said, even if you just go back 10 years, we had firewalls. We had some email security, internet security for checking on what people were sending or receiving or looking at. Maybe a few other bits and pieces, but nothing like what we have now. I mean, trawling through logs, for instance, if something had gone wrong or you suspected something was going wrong, just trawling through a firewall log could take you days to try and figure out what had happened, where it had happened. And because the information you were receiving was kind of verbose, but not really indicative of, it didn't tell you the story you needed, really. You had to, you're spending hours looking through information just to determine what had happened 3 days ago. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the amount of data that is coming at security professionals and even IT operations people. But, if you think about security professional, all of the different tools that they need to look at, to monitor, to correlate across, to be able to detect threats and investigate threats and ultimately respond to any threats that they see, it's exponentially grown. I can give you some figures around it from what we see at Arctic Wolf. We bring in data from across the infrastructure, so the endpoint and the network, the cloud, identity. We really believe in broad visibility being really a starting point to be effective in cybersecurity, right? You need to have that full visibility and full coverage. But to give you some figures around that, we bring into our platform, from a small customer, even from an SMB customer with like 300 users, the amount of data points that we would bring in, so a log of assist, a line of assist log, an API call, it's about 100 million data points per week that we would bring in from a small customer. And then if you put yourself in the position of that customer trying to ingest and understand all of that data and find threats within it, it's a mountain. It's finding the needle in the haystack. It's a very difficult task for customers and quite overwhelming as well with, the resource constraints that quite typically they have to face in cybersecurity.
But it's more than that as well, because it's like, and you kind of alluded to it there, or you did allude to it there, you have a small amount of systems generating logs, but it's not just like one set of logs, security logs are generating. You'll have 14 different security logs being generated by different systems, not to mention the endpoints, not to mention Active Directory or the Linux or firewall or whatever. And as I said, back then, you'd have to trawl through the individual sets of logs to try and correlate an event. Whereas now we have the ability through some of the software as a service stuff, especially, where you can pull in and ingest all of that information and actually get a story relatively quickly of what has happened within the organization. I mean, it was very true, and I'm not saying you're getting on a bit like me, but when we investigated incidents 20 years ago, it would take a long time to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, and speed is of the essence, right? When there's an active attack happening in your organization, speed is of the essence to be able to find, understand exactly what's happening and how you respond to that. And obviously there's been some evolution in that space, right? So if you think again back a little bit back in history, we were kind of looking at SIEM type tools, we were looking at SOAR type tools to aggregate those logs together. So at least people had one place to go to look at the logs instead of having to look at, as you say, 14, 15, 16, even more different UIs. At least you had one place that aggregated all of those logs together in one place to give that visibility. But even so, you're still looking for that needle in the haystack.
Yeah.
I guess that has evolved, as you say, into SaaS-based platforms, cloud-native platforms that are now termed XDR, or extended detection and response. And that's a very powerful piece of technology that customers can leverage to speed up that detection process. It's really about enhancing the threat detection and response processes. That's what XDR is really bringing to customers. And XDR itself, as we've discussed before, has evolved. Right?
Absolutely.
If you think about the evolution on the endpoint, going from AV to next gen AV to going to endpoint detection,
cloud-based AV,
based AV, EDR tools, right?
Yeah.
Because you couldn't just look at malware signatures anymore, right? You need to look at the tactics, the techniques, and the procedures, the TTPs that threat actors are using to attack. How they're now living off the land. They're using the tools installed on the systems versus not necessarily having to download lots of software. PowerShell is a good example of that, right? So EDR has been an evolution on the endpoint, and I see XDR very much as a bit of an evolution of that, where historically, if you can cover the endpoint, if that's where the attack's going to happen, that's where you need to cover. But I think the realization is that, again, you need to look much more broader than that. You need to look at the endpoint, you need to look at the network, you need to look at cloud clearly, and you need to look at identity, and you need to look at all of that in one place. And that's extended detection and response, with a focus on the ability to enhance that detection, to speed that detection up, to understand the correlation across all of those different log sources, and ultimately get to a point where you can verify and confirm it's a true positive, a true attack, and then obviously understand exactly what you need to do in terms of that incident.
Absolutely. I mean, I do remember when the thing we had to worry about was that our malware detection solutions were up to date, but now attacks are so blended. There's so many different ways that people are getting in. There's, as you say, living off the land. It's become the thing. I mean, I can't remember the last big virus that came out that worried anybody. I'll be honest. There's plenty of malicious software that you need to worry about, but normally it means somebody's gotten into your system and installed it there, rather than somebody's clicked on it through an email. That's pretty much gone now. He says, I don't know, but operations, and this is where I want to get to, operations and managing this ever-evolving world of technology, where you can spin up an entire network, within a couple of hours, compared to what it used to be, where some poor sods like you and I would have to sit there for 3 or 4 days building servers and testing them and checking them and making sure that they're all working. Not to mention picking them up with 3 or 4 other people and sticking them in a rack. But now, you can spin up solutions, and networks have become a lot more complex. There's a lot more as a service functions, distributed parts of your infrastructure as well. Your storage may be there. Your network actually might be housed there. You'll have applications there. You might have a third party who provides you with additional stuff. Web applications have become a lot more complex. And all of this kind of has led to this innovation in the operational state, where I think a lot of organizations have realized they just can't do it themselves anymore. Yeah. Back in the day, I'd be writing a policy whilst keeping an eye on the firewall, whilst making sure that the endpoint security was updating. And if there was any alerts popping out from, say, our email security saying that somebody has been sending something they shouldn't, or browsing something they shouldn't, I could keep track of all of that. Cripes, I couldn't do it now. Not with the way the business works. I mean, even in a small environment, and I think this is why a lot of people are migrating towards the kind of operational security as a service, that cloud solution that you guys have got such a good background in. You guys obviously originally come from the States, and what happens in the States tends to kind of get echoed down here in the UK and in Europe sort of 6 to several months later. There's a bit of a lag time. I mean, what are you seeing at the moment from operational security? Where are the concerns that you're seeing, your top bods looking at when dealing with all this information being ingested from different tools and different solutions into your platform?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Security operations is really what people are trying to drive towards, and it's worth taking a step back to think why people are doing that, right? They want to minimize any interruption to the business, right? That's number one. And there's compliance requirements around that. If you look at a UK financial company regulated by the FCA, you've got the FCA operational resilience requirements and rules for customers that include cyber to prove that that the business can continue to operate even if there's a cyber event that happens, a cyber attack that happens, right? You look at the different frameworks there are around to support that as well. So things like Cyber Essentials in the UK, ISO 27001, NIST, for example. So plenty of frameworks and playbooks, if you like, as well as compliance requirements, not just from a regulatory perspective, but also from a cyber insurance perspective, even from an audit perspective. We speak to a number of organizations that need to prove their cybersecurity posture. If they can't prove their cybersecurity posture, they're not going to win the business or be able to even trade business to business. Particularly, and a good example is trading with the UK government. You need to answer an audit and prove your cybersecurity posture before you be able to win that contract, right? So lots of requirements from the business perspective. Minimize any interruption to the business, allow you to win business in the first place, and regulatory kind of requirements. That's kind of why people want to get to security operations. But what is security operations, right? It's people, it's process, and it's technology. And I think there's a tendency in the cybersecurity world, and propagated by vendors almost certainly, to throw lots of tools at the problem, lots of technology at the problem, right? So I need the latest endpoint solutions, the latest network solutions, and the latest cloud solutions, identity solutions. And if I keep throwing more technology at it, hopefully that will solve the problem. But as you and I both know, Jim, it doesn't solve the problem, right? That's where security operations
causes more. There's more dashboards.
It causes alert fatigue. We talked about how much data comes out of these tools. Unless you've got a small army to look at that data that comes out and interpret it and understand what it means and what's critical within it, what to do when they find critical data in it, then it's a losing battle, because you can have all the technology that you want, but you're not going to be very effective in cybersecurity defense with just technology. You need the people and you need the process. And what we see as an organization at Arctic Wolf, we talk to obviously lots of customers, is it's the people and the processes, the bit that people struggle with. There's resource constraints from a budget perspective quite often. To build out your own security operations center is extremely expensive and unattainable for many organizations. Even for 1,000 user organizations, have you got the budget to invest in people to man that security operations center, right? If you talk to Gartner, it's 8 to 12 people was a minimum. And that probably is a minimum to build a security operations center. Most people can't afford to do that. One of the questions we often ask customers is, how many people have you got dedicated to security? And invariably, even in larger organizations, it's a handful of people. It's not it's not a small army that the larger enterprises can afford to deploy. And even if even once you've got the people side of it, you've got to think about the process side of it as well, right? And then for me, cybersecurity has two sides of it. One is obviously the reactive side. You need the people that can look at all this data that's coming towards them and interpret it, understand it quickly, and drive that outcome, which is prevent any interruption to the business, contain that threat quickly. That's the reactive side of it. The other side, I think, that is often overlooked from a security operations perspective, certainly this is what we hear when we talk to customers, is the proactive side of cybersecurity. And that's not just patching, right? That's a cybersecurity transformation. How do I look at all the different elements of my infrastructure, my security attack surface, if you like, and how do I continually harden that to minimize the likelihood that a successful attack will occur? So I think it's two things from a security operations perspective. You need to be reactive, absolutely. 24/7 coverage is mandatory. Threat actors don't wait until you're at work to attack you. And then you also need to be proactive around improving your cybersecurity posture continually and ultimately driving down your cyber risk and the risk that the business faces.
You've just described the ongoing dance of InfoSec. You're absolutely right. You have reactive and you have proactive. And I think one of the big problems we have, not as security people, when we're dealing with businesses, is they tend to not see that proactive stance as being valuable until somebody either a bit too close to them or they themselves have kind of experienced that horror firsthand. At
Yeah.
which point it's like, wow, okay, we do need to do something. This is why I like operational security. This is why I like XDR. This is why I like, solutions that can gather a lot of information together from a lot of different sources into one and provide you with a strategic view. Because obviously you have to learn a bit of communications, which is what I teach in my masterclass, learn how to speak to people. But you can actually go to the business and try to justify some of that proactive spend. We talk a lot in the security about defense in depth. And you're right, a lot of that is technology. But the information that we gather out of that technology makes, in many respects, operations even more valuable than just monitoring what's going on. Because by the time you've detected an incident, let's be honest, it's already either happened or you are literally, it's happening to you there and then. And there's a period of time where, you have to do some investigation and you have to try and prevent things from occurring. But quite often I find when you're detecting an incident, it's almost a little bit too late. You can handle it, you can deal with it. Better to do it proactive.
Better to minimize the likelihood, I think, or proactively aim to reduce that likelihood, as well as have that reactive capability. So you're confident that you know how to react. You have that incident response experience, if you will.
Absolutely. And again, you mentioned something else actually a few moments ago about staffing. We have such a big problem in security at the moment. We've done so many podcast items on this. We've done individual things. I mean, we've discussed it. I'm just pretty much discussing it with every InfoSec person that I've ever spoke to in the last 6 months. We just don't have enough people. There's not enough people in the industry.
There's a massive skills shortage. We know that. That's well publicized. And do you know what? Even if you can recruit the people, that it's not an insignificant resource to employ. And then it's a question of how you retain them, right? How do you keep them engaged in the role in the business? It's difficult to recruit, to retain, and to keep them, well skilled as well, because you need to keep them at cutting edge skill, which is where organizations like Arctic Wolf come in, right? Because we bring the people, we bring the process, we bring that expertise. Yes, we bring the technology or work with your technology, but bring a platform that can aggregate your technology. But it's the people and process that really makes a big difference for our customers, both reactive and proactive again.
Well, absolutely. And customers calling you up and get a view of really what's going on within the environment from, as we've talked about several times now, those multiple data sources. It's important because it's like, people are sort of sitting, you hear a lot of people saying that they're worried about things like ChatGPT, and it's like, all it is telling you an aggregate of what you're asking it, by engaging with a human being, especially somebody like yourself, you can get a view of really what's going on around the whole place, so you can actually do something with it and make a decision. You're not getting a load of stuff regurgitated from a single source for you to then read through everything and make a determination. Calling up, if one of your guys calls up and says, I think you guys are actually having a bit of an incident at the moment. We've detected this from your firewall. Port scans have been going on for X amount of time. We've seen some changes on your FIM. That we just want to validate is yours or is it somebody else? We've had multiple attempts to log in from multiple locations using the same accounts. It's inevitably it's something that I think we all need to seriously consider, no matter the size of the company. Okay, if you're like a one-man band, maybe not, but if you're of any organization of any size, and you make a good point as well earlier on, and we were weirdly enough talking about this just beforehand, there's a lot of changes occurring in the European Union around the minimum you're going to need to do to maintain security in your business. So it's going to become even more important to get some kind of skill set in the operational area, and I just don't see that skill set readily available for everybody. And you make a good point, keeping the talent engaged, getting them on board in the first place. And as we all know, retaining them, especially in a market when there's very few of them, it's like I've seen so many people shifting companies every 5 minutes, in the last, since the pandemic started, really. I mean, it's a crazy situation, but I just can't see how we can deal with security in any meaningful way without, covering operational security really early on. And I think the only way we're going to be able to do that in a lot of cases, especially critical infrastructure being under such the attack that we're seeing at the moment, with certain things going on in certain parts of the world that will remain nameless. Again, you've got to have the ability to defend against that. And I can't see any other way of doing it.
Yeah, and then that's why we're seeing, the adoption of solutions like Arctic Wolf, right? Which is, yes, it uses XDR from a technology perspective, although we call ours open XDR as an architecture because we're vendor neutral, right? We're not tying you into a particular technology. We work with the technology you've already invested in the tooling that you need. But it's the people in the process part. And that's why and customers are adopting that because they know that they can't do it themselves. Either from a budget perspective, either from attracting the talent and retaining the talent that we talked about perspective. And so they need the support. And so they are working with organizations like ourselves that deliver security operations as a service. And that includes multiple different solutions and outcomes that we drive. Yes, managed detection and response. So the threat detection and response part of it, but fully managing that and owning the outcome, not just throwing an alert back at you, but owning the outcome with you, hand-holding you through an incident. Risk management, continual assessment of risk, both on-prem but also public cloud, right? Look at your cloud security posture management, look at your external assets and the threats there. Yes, look at your endpoint, look at your internal networks, look at all of your risk. And many organizations have tried, again, to do that themselves, but they'll buy a tool and a tool will spit out a load of information. And then what do you do? Where do you start? It's much easier to have a managed approach where the risks are curated and it becomes much more of a BAU kind of operation to strengthen that cybersecurity posture versus I'll run an audit, see how many risks I've got, and then start at the top and try and work down. By the time I've got to the bottom, I've got the same amount again that have come in since, because it's a constantly evolving landscape. And then the user awareness training. So all of our services we have on top of our platform to deliver security operations are really mapped across the NIST cybersecurity framework. So the US NIST framework, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, their cybersecurity framework. So we'll benchmark customers and understand where they're at. Yes, we can immediately improve their cybersecurity posture by giving them 24/7 coverage, giving them expertise in terms of threat detection and response. But more than that, we want to work with them across that framework to identify weaknesses and help them understand how to improve their cybersecurity posture. And that is actually it's something that we own because we want to own that outcome. We're not waiting for a customer to call us. We're calling the customer. We're regularly scheduling that time with customers to say, let's look at this different area of your environment. Maybe it's identity. Maybe it's Office 365. Maybe it's your network, your endpoints. Maybe it's your firewall configuration. Because we have that global view of your environment with XDR, the technology that enables that, let's look at different areas for you, meet with you, and give you the recommendations, give you the outcome, and say, we've done the work, we've looked at this environment, this is what we recommend you do, and this is why we recommend you should do that. And it's going to improve your security posture. These are the reasons behind our recommendations. And the recommendations aren't buy more security tools. The recommendations are be effective in the security tools that you've got at the moment. Make the changes that you can to harden your environment. So that's the very much the proactive side of our service and the outcome-based approach.
I do love the fact that you guys are agnostic when it comes to, the technology as well, because there's a lot of other, dare I say, organizations that do what you do, where you almost have to purchase a certain type or certain products almost on top to make it work. And we all know that, especially today, there's so much new technology coming out and new solutions coming to the fore. We can't do that anymore. You have to be really eclectic in what you can deal with and how you can deal with it. I mean, information is information, but I do love that aspect of what you guys do. I wasn't aware you guys did security awareness as well. Is there anything you guys don't do?
There are things that we don't do. We are building services, but you're absolutely right about the vendor agnostic stuff. Really does appeal to our customers, because there are customers that will go all in on a vendor, and if you're all in on a vendor, that is not a bad approach, because you've got one organization to go to, perhaps. And depending on the size of the organization, that might be the approach that somebody wants to take. But our approach is, let's keep it open. So let's work with all of the leading EDR vendors. Let's work with the CrowdStrikes, the SentinelOne, the Defender for Endpoint, the Carbon Black, the Cisco, the Webroot, the list goes on that we work with, because that gives customers flexibility and ultimate choice. So if they want to choose best of breed in that particular area, they can, and we'll still work with them. We're vendor neutral, as we say. We've got those integrations out of the box across the board. But the same applies on the network, right? It's not that you have to use vendor X, Y, or Z's firewalls to adopt our service. We'll work with all the leading firewalls and ingest the data. It's working with what a customer already has. Cloud is the logical next one, right? So yes, you might be all in on Azure, but other organizations might have some workloads in Azure, some in AWS, some in GCP. It's a multi-cloud world that people are moving towards. Certainly when you're talking about customers of scale, we need to cover all of those, and it needs to be out of the box integration and very fast to set up.
Well, this is it. And I mean, we've done a number of videos where we discussed defense in depth, and, I've never been a big fan of the whole jump in on one vendor for everything. I mean, dare I say, if you went back to the days where Symantec were a particularly big player in the market, they did everything, didn't they? It was like, okay, you can buy your endpoint, you can buy your firewalls, you can buy this, you can buy that. All the good technology that started coming out was being bought by like 2 or 3 companies like Security Associates or something. Whereas nowadays, I always say to my customers, if you're going defense in depth, go defense in depth. Get, best for you guys, not necessarily best in class, because I think best in class is good, and it means different things to different people depending upon what they're doing, But the ability to then tie all of that in with an operational solution, an XDR solution, a solution that can kind of gather all of that info, makes it even more kind of, I don't know, it just makes it more compelling, because I don't like being tied into one tool set. I mean, I was one of the first, believe it or not, I was one of the first semantic engineers in Europe. And the amount of plethora of tools that I had to learn, but I never had any customers who wanted all of them. It was like, actually, no, we want to go here for our email security. Defense in depth is dependent on not one vendor, in my opinion.
And as you say, security is evolving. The tooling that is available is evolving. So, if you look at the market leaders in EDR today, that's different to what they were 5-10 years ago, right? So a great example of this, we talk to a lot of customers about this, is we talk to customers that might be using vendor X for their EDR tooling, and maybe they've used them for several years, for example, but they may be refreshing their Microsoft ELA as an example, and maybe they're going to E5 as part of their ELA because they're wrapping up many more services in that ELA, and that gives them the potential opportunity of moving to perhaps the Defender for Endpoint instead of using the vendor they were using. If you've got an XDR service or platform that is built around a particular technology, that makes that, it doesn't give you that flexibility to swap and change from a business perspective, a commercial perspective, as well as a technology perspective, right?
All your old logs become redundant because you've shifted over. You've moved to a different.
In some cases, you might have to change your entire XDR approach if it's built around a particular solution set, right? So there's different solutions out there. It's, as you say, it's picking the right one for the customer looking at their requirements first.
And I mean, that's also another compelling argument, again, for Arctic Wolf. Sounds like I'm plugging you guys now. The fact you can change technology and it doesn't matter. You can still retain the information. You can still retain the history and all the rest of it. you just basically call up and say, right, we're moving over to this product rather than what we've been using, which is this product. Maybe the support has ended with it and it's just died its natural death. Maybe, it's more compelling to go with another solution, or maybe a new solution, because, there's plenty of good new solutions out there that are popping up all over the place, and you can migrate over to them. And, I'm sure there's a bit of a project work that needs to happen, but it's relatively seamless, as opposed to going with the one vendor approach where it's like, oh, sorry, we can't deal with that technology because we haven't got the hook-ins. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah,
okay.
And actually, there's two elements to it, if you think about it. One is, how do I change across to that new kind of log source? And actually, nowadays, that's really easy to do because it's API driven, right? So to move from one EDR API source, as an example, to another EDR API source is really just a flick of a switch, or actually running both and one down and one up. So that's the actual, there is no project work. It's really easy to switch across from the technology perspective. But the other element of it, again, comes back to security operations, people and process, right? And the benefit that Arctic Wolf brings to our customers is one of scale, is one of, we've got, more than 2,000 people within the organization now. Well over half of that is dedicated to service delivery, right, to outcomes. And so what we have is that expertise across all of these partners, security tooling that we work with, right? So we have experts in all of the different EDR tools, the different clouds, the different firewall vendors, the different identity products. So we bring that expertise so a customer can be flexible in their choice, knowing that A, it's easy to move, and B, they've got the expertise behind it as well that they would expect.
So your guys actually know what they're looking at when they're seeing logs coming out, what it means for that kind of technology as well, rather than just ingesting information. You actually have people who know that technology and what's feasibly some of that outcomes that they're seeing is going to mean to that customer.
Yeah, and that's really important, right? Because you could have a solution built around particular technology where you're experts in that technology, but the other stuff is just information, as you say. From our perspective, it's being experts across the board in all the sort of leading tools out there. And there's great tools out there, and you need the tools, right? You need the controls in place, but you also need to operationalize them, and that's what we're bringing to our customers.
I think that's really good as well, because no one group. Again, we go back to the staffing thing, and you mentioned the people, the process, technology. There's no one person who can know everything there is to know about all the different technological types, or even one subset of technological types. There's so many of them now, so many products out there. Having the ability to just kind of plug into an operational set where they already bring that to the table. So when you're getting your advisories, you're getting it from people who know that technology, as opposed to what we used to do back in the day. It would take us, courses, sometimes days of fiddling with the technology to really get your head around what it was, how it works, the nuances behind it. If you've already got that kind of resource by outsourcing to your security operations to someone like yourselves, it does make it a hell of a lot easier. And that just means you can concentrate on the stuff that's really important. Because let's face it, unless you've built your own, SOC or whatever, you're going to need to build that massive team, which, as you say, it's very expensive. You can't really do it. It's just as easy to give it to somebody like yourselves and then just ingest the information you're getting from you to build that strategy and where you're going to go as an organization.
Yeah, and it's experience as well, right? So back to what you're saying, how you build up your knowledge base, it's the experience part that, as you and I probably both know, being around for a while, it's experience that really brings wisdom, right? That you don't get taught in class. Okay. So that experience, not just in terms of the technologies, but experience across many customers as well, right? So we've got thousands and thousands of customers, and that gives us a real advantage, right? Because yes, we get much earlier visibility than others in terms of emerging threats and new types of TTPs that are being used. Obviously, we have a threat organization called Arctic Wolf Labs that does all the cyber threat intelligence for us, and a number of other different threat intelligence that we bring into the platform. But it's also, if we see a threat in one customer, a new emerging threat, and I can think of several that have happened in the previous few weeks, we can we can immediately write detection rules and
Yeah.
inoculate all of our other customers. Here's something new. We can pivot. We can investigate. We can understand the techniques that are being used in that particular vulnerability that's being exploited. Maybe it's a new vulnerability being exploited, and then protect all of our other customers. And that's, again, one of the reasons we have a cloud native XDR platform, because if it's not cloud native, you can't run it at that scale. You can't have tens, thousands and thousands of users on a platform with all of that data coming in and be able to operate it at the speed of data, the speed that you need to operate it at for these emerging threats. And again, that's an organization will struggle to be able to build that capability. And that's why they're looking to, as you say, outsource to organizations like ourselves.
And I think it's important. It's an important defensive measure as well, having individuals who are, working across a plethora of different platforms, different environments. And I mean, whenever I'm training InfoSec people up, this is why first thing I always say to them, stay as general as possible for the first 5 to 6 years of your career. Learn how policies work, learn how procedures work, learn, how various different types of technology interact. Because it's important to have that kind of sort of baseline knowledge. And, again, with organizations who operate over multiple customers, if you're seeing an emerging threat starting to appear, like a specific type of access broker, malware starting to hit certain types of platforms, you can then apply that knowledge to everything. But, if you're a single SOC working in a single organization, you're not going to have the benefit of that intelligence coming through, and as you say, you've also got an intelligence unit, which kind of really helps, really, because you can kind of try and preempt some of that stuff as well. I think it's great. And it's like when people ask me to help them with PCI DSS and they say, well, what technologies have you dealt with as a QSA? And I'm like, well, all of them, because I've got multiple customers with multiple different environments, and I've pretty much seen everything there is to do in all of those, and different ways to apply it and different ways to get it done. And I do love the fact that, when you write your detection rules, it's stuff you've actually seen, and it's intelligence you're gathering from, your own sources, as well as that cumulative amount of information you're seeing across your whole customer base.
And a great, I guess probably just in terms of the timing, we're probably wrapping up, but I'll leave you with one great example of that, which was Log4j. So we're all familiar with Log4j and the impact that had on the whole community. Right? And there's a lot of sleepless nights with Log4j. What we were able to do with our customers is immediately roll out detections to try and find where Log4j was used in our risk management tooling. Right, so we could look at where it was actually being used within an organization. But more than that, we also rolled out detections to see where if somebody had it and it was being exploited, you need those detection rules rolled out within hours, to be able to see that exploitation to then contain that particular threat. And actually, again, it comes back to the scale of Arctic Wolf. What we're able to do, part of Arctic Wolf Labs, was we created a tool over the weekend, because yes, you can have network-based scanners and agent-based scanners, which we have. But many of the organizations, many of the software vendors out there didn't even know Log4j was used. The library wasn't aware the library was used in their software, because it's very prevalent in terms of being used by developers. So we rolled out a tool that would actually search through the file system and look for embedded jar files, EAR files, WAR files in organizations to find Log4j where it wasn't actually known. So people hadn't even found it through any scanners. And customers could then run that tool to be really confident that they've picked up where Log4j was used across their entire environment. And again, we come back to people and process, right? So yes, we created the tooling, within days and rolled that out to our customers, but we didn't just throw the tool at them. We phoned them up. So their concierge team, every customer gets their own concierge security team. We're in contact with them. They know the customer's environment.
Yeah.
So here's this tool. This is how you run it. Let's work with you. Let's tell you what we've seen in your environment. Let's tell you how to use this additional tool to get that deeper level of visibility into Log4j. And of course, another CVE came out with Log4j a few days later, right? It wasn't just the first CVE, it was the second one. Then got upgraded because of the POC for the remote code execution. It's about updating that tool in hours, again, contacting every customer, making them aware that this is a different CVE, a different log4j issue. The tool's been updated. This is what you need to look for. This is what we found in your environment. So a customer really is, hears about something by log4j, should hear about it from us first, because we're providing the security operations. We want to be that proactive with our customers, not just hear about it from a threat bulletin perspective that we'll share with them, but then very proactive about what we found in their environment, whether it's vulnerabilities or exploitation, and what we've done about that, and how we can go deeper and how we can support them, so that when their board asks them, what have you done about log4j, they can give them a really comprehensive answer immediately in short time. So that's kind of wraps it up quite nicely, I think, in terms of our approach.
Absolutely, and you are absolutely correct. We are reaching the end of our time, but it's a really good example of, as we were discussing, the ability to see what's going on across a market. You get some feeds come through, you get a 0-day suddenly hit. At least you've got the ability to detect it within the environment based off of, what you're seeing in other environments and all the rest of it, which is really, really valuable. Because, the speed that you react and the speed that you understand of where you are from a security standpoint with what you have, especially on 0 days, is really, really important, because it can figure, in how you're going to react to that. It allows you to do planning as well. What are we going to do if we do get hit by this? Is there any workarounds we can do in the meantime based off of what we're seeing from, information coming from ops? No, I think it's massively valuable, and it's been absolute pleasure speaking to you, Jason, and learning a bit more about Arctic Wolf and what you guys do and how you guys kind of view security and your methodology behind it. I think it's really, really useful. And to any of you out there, please feel free to get in contact with us if you want to learn a little bit more. We're more than happy to refer you over to Jason or one of his colleagues. If you have any questions for Arctic Wolf, again, please feel free to put any comments in the down below. Please like and subscribe. Press a little bell button whilst you're there. We've had a lot of new followers recently. It's been absolutely fantastic how the channel is blowing up. But for this particular one, Jason, thank you ever so much for coming and having a chat with us.
Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate you inviting us on, and hopefully we can talk again on a new topic or another topic soon.
Oh, we will. We will. But thank you all out there, and I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be seeing you all again soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.